What you are listening to now is a special edition of the Central Indiana Sports Report, podcast number 332.1. Former Tri-Central and Tipton head coach, also DeKalb and Madison, among others. Cliff Hawkins and his kidney donor, Kira Newkirk. Special co-host, MIchelle Garmon of the Tipton Tribune and Elwood Call Leader. It was a great 90 minutes. Please enjoy.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
Welcome to a special Central Indiana Sports Report here in downtown Fishers today at Cafe Patachu. Did I say that right?
You did.
With former Tipton head coach Cliff Hawkins and Kira Newkirk for a special podcast, and MIchelle Garmon of the Tipton Tribune and Elwood Call Leader is also here with me. She is going to take control of the interview. Welcome, MIchelle.
Thank you, Greg. I'm happy to be here. For those of you that don't know the backstory or may have read it and kind of forget, Cliff resigned from the Tipton coaching job because he was receiving a new kidney on April 8th. And that kidney came from Kira Newkirk, who is a former student of Cliff's and has more ties than that. So first, I'm going to let Kira introduce herself and kind of give you her background on that. And then we'll go to Cliff and he can retell a little bit about his story. So Kira, go ahead.
Great. Hi. Yeah, my name's Kira Newkirk, and I am the vice president for Indiana Donor Network. I've been working with the Indiana Donor Network for 7 years now, and so donation and transplantation is my passion. My background, I am a registered nurse, and so I've been in critical care nursing my entire career as a nurse, but have spent the last 7 years in donation and transplantation.
So when you say critical care nurse, then have you worked, when you did some of that nursing, were you working with donor patients?
Yeah, I spent probably 4 or 5 years in the pediatric ICU at Methodist Hospital here in downtown Indianapolis. And so, unfortunately, I saw a lot of tragic events that led to children becoming organ donors. Probably one of the most tragic things that you could think about is losing a child. But those families who said yes to donation saw their children's legacy live on through the recipients of their organs, and
More than one.
more than one, absolutely. And they just, what donation meant to them, I saw how they processed their grief. It meant that it gave purpose to the loss of their child, of someone living their life. Certainly, anybody would change the outcome of losing a child, but the legacy that donation gives to that family and their loved one that they lost is just incredible. And I've witnessed so many amazing stories that have come out of someone giving the ultimate gift of organ donation. And so that's why this is my passion. This is my life's mission, is to continue to advocate for it. And so professionally, I do it. And now personally, that has all come, connected.
So tell us when you first met Cliff and how you got to.
Well, 30 years ago, 30 years ago,
You're not old enough
No,
to
she
have
doesn't.
known
You guys,
in
if you guys,
30 years.
if you guys could see Kira, and I'll take a picture here before we leave, and Greg can run it on the background of the podcast. You will understand. She looks like 30 years ago she would have been a toddler. Okay.
Oh gosh, you guys are way too kind, and I am using my sunscreen appropriately now. So hopefully that's what the work is. No, when you think about being a 13-year-old kid and not realizing 30 years later the impact that you're going to make in someone's life, it's unfathomable. You just don't think about that as a kid. You know, I have an almost 11-year-old, and to think about like he could go on to save one of his teachers' life, like, uh, our story is here today. I was a kid in a small community that was super tight knit. We took care of each other. Cliff was the head, Auburn, Indiana. Cliff was a head coach of our boys basketball team and also a teacher educator at the high school. And so he actually had stepped in when the girls basketball team didn't have a head coach at the time to run a summer camp for us. And so that was my first exposure to Cliff. And his son is 2 years older than me, and his daughter is 2 years younger than me. And so, we all just kind of ran around together. I was in and out of his house, unbeknownst to really kind of him. He just always had a gaggle of kids that were kind of coming in and out. And Cliff and his wife, Julie, were just always so welcoming and, loved community and loved kids. And that's really kind of where our story started, is I was just a kid going to high school and never, ever in my dreams did I think that our story would find each other again. Our lives would connect again 30 years later. And so it's just so awesome, and it speaks to developing community, where you're from and how do you stay connected to people. And then when you have the opportunity to help someone, that you take action.
Now we're going to go to Coach Cliff Hawkins, and I'm going to let Cliff introduce himself, and he can talk first about his last stop was Tipton, where I'm going to let him start and talk about the places he's coached, and then we'll go into when he found out he needed a kidney and how all that went on. So go ahead, Coach.
I found out a little earlier that he was a Cascade cadet, is where it all began.
That's where I started, yes. I moved from Ohio to Indiana and became a Cascade cadet, and my first state tournament was George McGinnis and Steve Downing, so you can imagine what that was all about with the Indianapolis Washington Continentals. But first, before I start, I just want to thank both of you for having us today, because it means a lot to Kira and I to be able to tell our story and possibly give hope to anyone that's out there wanting to receive, hoping to receive a kidney, and also to those that maybe are considering being a donor and realize that the two people that are involved in this process are sitting side by side today talking to you. So it really can happen. But, I've had an unbelievable career in Indiana. I did coach at a lot of different schools, and part of the reason was when we first started out, we didn't have class basketball. And so my goal at that time was always to coach like I was going to be there forever, teach like I was going to be there forever, but always keep in mind that maybe there could be something else available. And sometimes when you start small, and I started at Caston, I was a JV coach one year, and the next year I was the head coach. And then I had an opportunity to go with Bill Hodges at Indiana State. And I got my master's degree all in 1 year with the summers on each end, and I got to coach college basketball. But I did come to a reality one day, laying on the only piece of grass that time at Indiana State. It used to be all sidewalks, but by the library, I laid down and I thought, what I really want to do here, and it was, I wanted to work with young people. So I really wanted to work, and I really wanted to teach. And so I made the decision, laying out in front of the library at Indiana State, that I was going to get back into high school coaching. And fortunately, I got to come to Tipton County at that time and coach at Tri-Central. And of course, in those days, and I know this is always hard to talk about, but I really was a Trojan, and we were trying to beat the Tipton Blue Devils, okay? But
They were the worst, weren't they? I was at Elwood. They were our rivals too. Tipton was just the worst, and they were so good at everything. It was
So, Cliff, was Dick Barr still the coach at Tipton when you first got there?
what I wanted to say, Dick Barr treated me, here I was, he was on the end of his career. I was in the beginning of my career. He would put his arm around me. He welcomed me. I went scouting one night. He had me sit beside him right by the stage in Tipton, and all the Tipton fans know where that stage is. And so I said, I'm going to scout you tonight. They were playing in Noblesville. And he said, well, why don't you just sit behind the bench? I'm thinking, okay, what coach tells somebody that they're going to play? But he just was that, he treated me so well. And Dick Barr was a legend at Tipton, and he served there 2 times, had the number 1 ranked team in the state in 1964 or 5. And
64. In fact, they would have been a really good state contender that year because they beat the 2 teams that play for the state championship, but he lost a key starter, Harvey Harmon, to an injury before the section.
Absolutely.
Elwood and Tipton had 2 of the best teams in the entire state.
That's exactly right. I know who was playing over at Elwood too. But so the career went on, and I kept moving up, and then it was Greenfield. Okay. And from Greenfield then is when the greatest opportunity ever came so far, and they were all good. I loved everywhere I was. But we moved to DeKalb, and we never dreamed that we would move out of Indianapolis area to Auburn. But as soon as we drove through the town, as soon as we went to the school that had just been, they had done a remodeling project on it, and as soon as I walked in the gym, there was just everything that made me feel like I feel like I've been here forever. And way back in the old days, there was a coach there named Jim Likes, who had also coached at my high school after I was done, and I knew him well. And then Jan David at that time was still coaching, and so I had been to DeKalb a few times. So DeKalb is where Kira and I met, and then from there we went a little bit bigger, and that was Center Grove. And then at that point is when I decided I was ready to kind of gear down a little bit with a little smaller program, and went to a couple schools. But sometimes when you go into a smaller school, you might start in a certain job and you might end up doing a lot of different things. At one point I was kind of an acting principal. I didn't even have a license.
Other duties as assigned.
Other duties as assigned. And I got to thinking about that. So, but fortunately, for the end of my career, there's so many great things that happened. I got to come to Tipton, and that was a homecoming as well, because, you know, there were some of my former players around. There was Corey Fernung, who was in my camp of champions when he went to Tri-Central, and he was my athletic director.
I remember him in high school.
And his dad had been a very good player. His dad had been my athletic director at Tri-Central. I never even thought a thing about it, of coming to Tipton, but it just all worked out. So that's kind of how I got to Tipton, and lots of nice things happened there. But one of the greatest things that ever happened that occurred was from my past, when I received information that there was possibly a donor in the registry.
Cliff, you were at Tipton when you got the diagnosis about your needing a kidney, correct?
So the first year, coaching Ben Humrickhouse and all those guys, they were great. But I noticed as I moved into February of that year, that first year at Tipton, 2019 and 2020. So it was the spring of 2020, just before COVID. In February, I started to notice that something wasn't exactly right, but I just kept going, And so COVID hit on March the 13th or 14th when they closed the schools. I came back to Greenwood because we still had our home there. And that's when I started exercising strong because, that's what you had to do. There wasn't a lot to do during that time. And I noticed...
I lost almost 50 pounds.
Yeah, I was close. But I tried to accelerate when I would walk, and I noticed that it wasn't good. And I knew I had a physical scheduled for May, but of course, as you know, they weren't really into that. So what happened was I did get to do the blood test. And that blood test definitely pointed out that I was in end-stage kidney disease. And I didn't know. And I lots of times, older gentlemen will present in different ways. That didn't happen to me. It was just something that was kind of an anomaly of how it happened. But they immediately read my blood test and made a call and said, you have to be in the emergency room within minutes. I know these numbers won't mean anything to a lot of people if they have never heard of the word, like I hadn't. But they said your creatinine is 18.6, and it's supposed to be about 1 to 1.5. I was in severe trouble. My potassium was out the window, and that's when you start to have organ shutdown. So I'm in the emergency room, and they told me that day that I wouldn't be able to leave the hospital without dialysis. Well, COVID had hit. My wife was able to bring my computer. So all I had to say to people at that time while I was trying to learn this, because nobody could go in with me. I didn't know any of the words or anything. I had to learn all this and then make phone calls. But I was able to continue because when we started COVID, we were pretty much giving assignments is what we were doing. So I was able to do that from my hospital bed. And the only thing, I was supposed to have a meeting on Zoom. And that's when I had Julie call and say, if you'll just allow them to know that I currently have some kidney problems, I'm not going to be able to attend the meeting. And then after that is when I started to share, once I understood end-stage kidney disease, because I didn't know what it meant. I just thought you have kidney disease and you can get better. But you need to listen, chronic kidney disease is the key word. And that means you can't get better, but you can prolong and do things to keep it going through possibly dialysis, which I didn't start till almost 3.5 to 4 years later, because I did control it with diet and exercise. I was able to get the creatinine down through how measures in the emergency room and so on, and not down where it should be, but down enough that I could walk out of the hospital. And that's kind of where the story starts with, I start going to a nephrologist and then get involved with the kidney donor program.
So you said you went, 2-3 years before you needed to go to the dialysis,
almost
right?
3.5 to 4, actually.
Now, and I know you taught full-time when you came to Tipton,
Oh,
taught
yeah,
and coached.
I was still teaching.
Okay. So at what point then you kind of went to, was it kind of like part-time teaching and then retired?
Yeah,
then
I was
you retired
fortunate.
from teaching, but not coaching.
Yeah, of the 6 years, I was 2 years full-time, and I had chronic kidney disease in that full-time year. And that was kind of interesting to mix with basketball and know when to do my appointments and, half sick days or personal days or whatever. But it all worked. And then the next year I was able to negotiate half-time. And so I would plan my appointments in those open gaps and still teach. But then the last 2 years I was able to negotiate. I've been in the classroom for 44 years. I loved it. But it was best that I really could have a lot more flexibility, and it worked out perfectly. And I really thank the Tipton people, the administration, for allowing me that, because it allowed me to continue to live a normal life as much as I could through dialysis. And I finally had to go on dialysis when my nephrologist looked at me and said, Cliff, I can't go any further. You may be sitting on the bench one day and ask, who's out there? Okay, so he said, you're going to have to start. And that's kind of how this all began.
So when did you go on the donor list?
Previous to going off of dialysis, I finally was able to get an appointment with the Ascension, St. Vincent Ascension team, transplant team, in about, it was actually October 24th of, before I went off of dialysis down the road. It was a year and a half or so before I went off. So somewhere in 2023, I had that appointment in October. And then I learned what I was going to have to do. And there's many tests that you have to take. And again, I encourage everyone to do them. The team there is so helpful in trying to help you. get the appointments set up, but you have to stay on it. Kira went through the same thing as she decided to become a donor, only had even a few more tests. And so those were challenging times, but I believed it could happen. And so it was necessary for me to keep working and doing what I do. And it was necessary for me to meet all the expectations of the team at St. Vincent's. And I told the players in the summer of 2024, here's how we're doing this. I have end-stage kidney disease. I am handling it, and I will only talk to you the next time if something new has happened that you need to know, which was in April after the sectional. And I maintained my truth. And the reason was I didn't want them coming into the gym saying, how are you today? And every day I was ready because I wasn't having to teach. So every day I was ready to show them that regardless of your adversity, you can keep going. And I think all of us in life have faced those challenges.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, anyone that was watching you coach and on the side would have never known that you were going through what you were going through, because
we interviewed you a couple times, no idea.
But and you coached the same. You stood up through the game. You were out talking the time. I mean, it's like you never had to sit down and just like rest or turn anything over to your assistants. You were it. Real quick, after you found out you were going to have to go on the donor list, then did the members of your family start getting tested?
Yeah, there was no match, believe it or not, within my family, and
I bet that was hard on them.
It was, but now the story is so much different because I have a very nice family. I have lots of sisters, no brothers, but we've brought another daughter into our family. Okay, she fits right in between. She's been there when Matt's visited. She's been there when Megan's visited. She came to my birthday party with my 3 sisters who have trouble hearing. Okay, and she's been so kind. And she told me one day that never did she realize when I'm just going to use the word, gave up a kidney, she would gain a family.
So, Cliff, real quick, so Kira found out about this because you went out and you shared your story. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I filled out all the paperwork, and she then, and she'll tell her part of filling out the first registration slip. But let me know that a lot of people had looked at my website, but one person had registered, and it gives you hope, but you just keep going because you don't know who the person is. And, that's the right way to do it. So as things unfolded besides the website, I realized that, for whatever reason, part of it I had kept so private at Tipton because I didn't want people to bear a burden of anything or feel badly. I knew I had to keep my focus and keep going. But I quickly realized that you do have to be your own advocate. And sometimes others can be your advocate for you as well, but you have to be your own advocate. So in the summertime, about a year ago now, one of my former assistant coaches' brothers had passed, and there was going to be a memorial service that evening, one of the nights of that week. And so what I did, I called a former player of mine who is a dentist in Auburn, and his name is Andy Schmidt. His father was my dentist when I was in Auburn. Jerry Fernand, Corey Fernand, Andy Schmidt, Dan Schmidt, okay? His father had been my dentist, but I just asked Andy if I could arrive around 4 o'clock and if we could have just a few minutes to talk. And when I got there, Andy knew I had been on dialysis. I had shared that at one point with him. And he just asked me how it was going, and I said, I need to talk with you a little bit. I'm not here to ask you for your kidney, but I am here to ask you to tell my story. And so I went back through it all because, no, he's busy in his life. He has children, wonderful family. He's having to keep things figured out. But I went ahead and kind of shared what we've done here so far. And Andy looked at me and he said, Coach, I'll tell your story. And I said, Andy, you don't have to have a meeting. It can just be casual. So he went to play golf with two of my former players at DeKalb. And one was Mike Christner, and the other was Grant Stupak. Grant Stupak happens to go with Kira. But we didn't know any of this, So I'm saying to, Andy, they're done playing golf and they're standing in the driveway. And he says, did you guys realize Coach Hawkins needs a kidney? And they didn't. And he said, so Grant really zeroed in on that message because obviously Kira works for the Indiana Donor Network. And so when he got back to see her that evening, he mentioned it. And I think this is probably where it's really good for Kira to start because this is how it goes
tell
forward.
us about what went through your mind and when he told you what went through your mind and then what your steps, what you did.
Yeah, Grant, came back from that golf tournament that day and was like, hey, did you know Coach Hawkins needs a kidney transplant? And it was probably something along the lines of, haha, do you think you could do something about that because of, working for Indiana Donor Network? And by the way, I cannot affect anybody's status on the transplant wait list. And so
Come on, you gotta have some.
I have zero pull in that. I absolutely am.
And we are going to stress that so she doesn't get deluged with phone calls that people know clear or whatever and say, hey, can you help me?
And I've had people actually ask me that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but, that Cliff is someone from my hometown. And this was not the first time that I have been, with the work that I do, I hear a lot about people who are waiting for an organ. And sometimes that comes from people that I know in the community, from, various places that I've lived and worked. And so it's not the first time that I've known someone who has needed an organ transplant. This time was a little bit different. I've always felt like when that that ask has been there is someone needs a kidney transplant, I've always asked myself, could I do that? Could I donate a kidney? And I think when people are thinking about that, they think I would absolutely do it for a family member, hands down, no matter the time. But when you're donating altruistically, you're thinking about, is this the right time for me? And, previously I had a small child, I had started a new job, this, that, and other, life events, kind of trumped being able to go through with a living donation.
Plus,
And
you have to
so-
think about your own future. What happens if to your remaining kidney, if something happens to you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be a living kidney donor comes with a lot of consideration. And sometimes, when a family member needs that, you are like, absolutely, I will do whatever I can to help a family member. When you're doing it altruistically, you think about a lot of different things, as what is my health going to be like? I have a child. What if they need a kidney? All these things, you have to consider. And so I believe timing lined up. There were a series of events that led me to believe that this was the right time and that I was in a good place in my career, in my family life, in my social life. I'm healthy. I am not getting younger. So that now was the time. And I said, why not just try? Just for going through the process doesn't commit you to doing the donation.
My name
There's
is
lots
Cliff
of things
Hawkins.
that,
Well, I've been a teacher and a coach
you have
for
to make sure you're medically eligible.
46 years.
They're not going to
and I've been a
put
head
your
basketball
life
coach
in
for
jeopardy
44 years.
To
And
become
I
a living
just
donor if
am
they don't
recently
think that
retired.
you will have the same quality
My
of
wife's
life
name is
after
Julie.
donation.
We will
So
be
they're just
married
not going to
50
put your
years
life at risk
this August.
at all.
And if you do have complications with your other kidney,
In 2020,
you become
I found out that my kidney
go
was
to the top of the
failing
list
by having done a blood test for a
priority
physical.
and
then
in the wait
in
list
2023,
I
was able to
have
be added
given
to
that,
the transplant list
that
and
gift.
then began dialysis.
So yes,
That's kind of
there
where
is
it
that.
started for me.
You know, I've not been a person.
My name is
to
Kira
live
Newkirk.
in
I am the
what
Vice
ifs.
President of Business Operations
And
at
so
Indiana
you
Donor
don't know
Network.
what's going to happen in the future.
As I was
and
growing
I have the
up, Cliff
opportunity
was
to
kind of the
affect someone's
staple
life right
of
now.
the
And
community.
that's what I chose to do.
DeKalb
And I
High
know
School
that
had
is
this
not
phenomenal
how
boys basketball
everybody
at the time,
thinks,
and at the
you
heart of
know?
that
I'm
was
saying
Cliff
to the
and his
people who
coaching.
are concerned that
Everybody
if they
knew
give
who
up a
Cliff
kidney, what
was.
if I have a problem
Just
with
the
my
most
remaining
kind,
kidney?
genuine person
There is
that
some
just wanted to
reassurance
see
to
his
that.
There's some
players and his
reassurance. You know,
students
you're going to go
succeed.
through medical
I
care.
taught at DeKalb
Certainly,
High School
it
from
is a risk.
1992 to
I
2004.
have, you know,
And
if something
I
does
ran a
happen,
camp.
I have
Kira
one
was
kidney,
in that
and-
camp. I knew her, you know, just
but
from
it's not
the
something that
really
I think
the
about and
great
I
sport
dwell
of
on or
basketball
anything
and
like
working
that.
with
It's
young
a,
people.
You know, it's something that
I
you have
just
to
felt
consider.
this calling
But,
to do
the
something.
chances of
On his
me
profile,
and someone
it
else
says
who
click to
would
register
be
for Cliff,
eligible
and
to
so that's what I
donate
did.
that would progress to a
when I
chronic kidney
found
disease
out
and needing
who
transplant.
my donor was,
It's a really, really
it was
low
so touching and
percentage.
overwhelming because
It will
you
probably
know,
will not happen that
what
I
a great
will,
person she is
you know,
to
end
do
up in
this.
chronic kidney failure, ever, you know, with one or two kidneys. So, and that's why what made me a good candidate
I have
of
been a
being
nurse
able
for
to
20
donate to Cliff.
years.
Tell us
And
what
I've
kind of
spent
series of tests.
every
How long was the
day
process on your
going
end
to work
to know that you were
thinking about
eligible?
how do I make a
donor,
difference.
Like for Cliff, I mean, what series of tests and things did you have to go through?
Yeah,
It's
well, one, you have
most
to
human
see
thing
what,
that you can
see if your kidneys are functioning at a level that you could donate. So it was urine test, it was blood test, and once you kind of go through those initial testing of, okay, do I have good enough kidney function to support my life just in general? Just the way I am.
Made me
Do I
emotional
have
seeing
enough
her
kidney
so
function
emotional
to
because
maintain the
I've had
quality of
different
life with
times
one
where
kidney?
I've been that
And
way, but
then
not
once
very
you
often.
get to
But
that step, then you go on to
one was listening to a
diagnostic
voicemail
testing where
yesterday
they're
from
looking
a
at
cousin in Massachusetts.
the imaging of your
It just
kidneys.
really threw
Do
me.
you have
know.
correct anatomy?
Yeah.
You know, because a
She
lot
said,
of
"You're
people
resilient,
live
and I
with
know
some
you'll
type
move
of
forward."
like congenital abnormality in their kidneys, which
I'll
is
immediately
completely fine for that,
sense a
but it
difference
makes
having a kidney
transplant
now.
difficult. You have to have your arteries and your veins
transplant
and
team
all those things,
is
all those
truly
connection
a team
points
that works
in
together.
good
And
status to be
that
able
really,
to
you know,
be
I've been a
transplanted.
coach for
And
44
so
years
we
as a
went
head coach. You know,
so then I
that's
moved
my whole
to
goal is
the
to build a team. And when I watch
phase,
that team
looking
function,
at the
I
anatomy,
think
the pictures of
it's
my kidney.
unbelievable.
Is
And they're
it the
dealing
right
with human
size
lives. I deal with
for
human lives, but I
Cliff?
deal with them in a different way.
Because,
We get to play
you know, if
basketball. Okay.
you know,
They're
Cliff
saving
was
somebody's
a
life.
6'5",
See you later.
you know, 300-pound man.
All that time you wish you'd been 6'5" when you were playing basketball, good thing you weren't. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, my kidney probably wouldn't be able to support his body frame. So the donor and the recipient have to be
It's not about
compatible
just donating
size.
an organ.
Then we have to be a
You
compatible
can do
blood
something
type
to help
and
a stranger.
antibodies. And so it is a
And
series
I
of testing. I
just
started
hope
it
that
in
people
November
hear this
and
story
due to
and
Thanksgiving and Christmas and New
practice
Year's,
compassion
I think all of our testing was
empathy
pretty much wrapped
for
up
your
by
neighbors,
the end
for
of
your
January.
community.
Well, she knew you were doing
And
this.
it
He didn't
doesn't
know.
matter
He didn't know it. So
they are
yeah,
or what
so
they
part of
do.
the story is
Just be a good human.
I was getting tested for him anonymously. I didn't tell any of my family either.
That did Grant know.
Grant did not know. So I didn't even tell Grant until probably mid-December when I was having to go for one of the really long testing days. And I I was like, well, maybe I should tell him what I'm actually doing. Going through this is a very personal decision, and my way is not the best way for anybody. But one, I'm fairly educated in donation and transplantation, and so my choice to do this anonymously, kind of from everybody, was because I wanted to isolate this decision to make sure I was making this decision without a lot of extraneous noise of either people being super positive about it, like, oh my gosh, you're like, I can't believe you're doing it, or, the negative of, how could you do this? Like, what about your health? What about another family member? What if, what if, what
I
if?
was going to say, or your parents afraid of something happening to you during surgery.
Correct. All the worries that everybody else has for you. I wanted to be in a bubble that I knew I was making the most educated and informed decision that I could, and I knew I had the support of my family. I knew I had the support of all my colleagues because that's what they do. I really needed to know that what I was doing it for the right reason, that it felt good to me, and without any pressure. I knew that if I had talked to Cliff and we connected before I told him that I registered, that no matter what, I would 100% want to donate to Cliff, just because of who he is. But I needed that bubble to make sure that it was right for me without any other noise around it.
So when did you find out that you were a match for Cliff?
It was probably mid-January after all the tissue typing was done, and mid blood tests were done. I think Cliff probably found out a little bit later than that. I was in the know a little bit more before Cliff was, because really, when you're a living donor, you have a lot of control over the process of um, when are you going to do the next steps? They really make sure you're doing it without coercion. And so I knew, and then I had to, once I knew I was a match, then I had to say, okay, what is the next steps of letting Cliff know that we were a match? And really, there's a lot of information, and even being an educated healthcare provider that absolutely knows the ins and outs of donation transplantation, there were still some factors that I didn't quite understand. If yes, we were a good blood match, but we had some high sensitivity towards antibodies. And so in my experience, I was thinking, well, does that not make us a good match? And so then I was thinking, okay, should I donate on behalf of Cliff and donate to someone else and move him up the list so he gets a better match? And so there was some decision making in our process.
So that's an option.
So that is an option. So if you're wanting to donate to someone, but yet you're not a match, you can actually donate on behalf of that person and reduce their weight. So if I were to donate to someone else on behalf of Cliff, then that would have reduced his weight. I think they said between 6 to 12 months, it would have reduced his weight for a kidney. And so, but I had to ask questions, just like Cliff said, like, you have to be your own advocate. If you don't understand something, you need to keep asking questions. So I needed to continue to ask questions and feel good about, where is my kidney going? And so I absolutely would, if we weren't a great match, I would have absolutely donated on his behalf. But then I wouldn't have known the recipient at all, which is okay. It's okay. It's one of the facets of donation. But my intention was to donate to Cliff. And so I really had to understand our level of compatibility. What risk was it for Cliff? And is that something that I was willing to accept, because once you donate your kidney, that is not your kidney anymore. I have no control over.
It's right there, though.
It's sitting right next
It's
to
sitting
me.
right next to you.
It's sitting right next to me, which is completely wild.
It is wild.
But I don't have control over what happens to my kidney after it leaves my body. The gift is in the donation, and that's where you have to relinquish any control. And as for a mildly type A person, that is difficult. But I want Cliff, like I want Cliff to live his life, and with my kidney and his kidney now. Actually, it's not my kidney anymore; it's his kidney. The best way he can possibly live it.
Does it help too, because you knew by giving it, you knew who you were giving it to. It was going to Cliff, that it was going to be taken care of. It wasn't somebody that was just gonna not.
Absolutely. That is 100% a big part of when you're a living donor. When you're giving up, one of your kidneys, you absolutely want to make sure it's taken care of. You don't want someone to kind of squander that away, right? I knew hands down 100% that he was going to do whatever it takes to make this transplant and this kidney successful. And so that completely eases your mind when you're thinking about doing something like this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, your choice to donate isn't tied to how the person lives their life, or it shouldn't be, because you can be let down in so many different ways. If you have this grandiose idea that you're saving a person's life, and then what if they don't measure up to what you think they should be? You can't have, you have to disassociate at the donation. Once that kidney leaves your body, you have to be okay with whatever happens next. And so, and it can be really scary because, certainly I had fears. What if it fails? Like, one of my big questions leading up to it is, how soon will that kidney start working? Like, I want to know, I want to know all the details, and so after transplant, our surgeon was like, it pinked up immediately and it started making urine. It was like, we were like so happy about pee.
So at what point did you kind of reveal yourself so that Cliff could find out? Because I know Cliff knew he had a donor kidney, but when you found out you had a donor kidney, you didn't know it was Kira right away, did you?
Not right away.
They tell you that you had a registration, right?
Yes, I knew I had a registration, and I knew the process. It's kind of interesting when she's doing all of her testing. I'm doing my second round of testing because it's the second year, because you have to be eligible for this. You can't. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have some extenuating circumstances like maybe diabetes. It doesn't mean you can't get a kidney. It just means I was a better risk or a better candidate, I should have said, for a kidney, because I didn't have those things. So we were kind of going through that at the same time. But then as things unfolded, there became a possibility. Our coordinator would call me and say, Cliff, there's a possibility here. And then, comes, you have to, as she had to put herself in a bubble to stay focused on that. I knew I had to stay in a different focus of, you've got to keep going on with your life and not allow yourself to just think about this all the time, because you know there's a chance of a life-saving donation going to occur. So I finally started asking some questions, and of course she still couldn't quite tell me yet, because in the end Kira had to get herself she was all the way there, but we talk about toughness all the time in life, and everybody said to me, man, you must really be tough to go into that surgery and get a kidney. And I think, really, what kind of choice did I have in the end? I mean, I can go a long time on dialysis, but this is a chance at a new life. But think about what she had to do. And I think she's the most mentally tough person that I've had the opportunity to be around, because I remember the first time we met finally, and I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but she had a hold of my hand and she had a hold of my wife's hand, and she said, "Thank you for this opportunity." And I thought, okay, wait a second. I'm the one.
It really is a blessing that you're giving. It really is an opportunity.
And you will always be an angel to the Hawkins family. You're forever. You are going to hold a very special place in the hearts, not just Cliff, but his wife and his kids, because of your gift. And it's an unselfish gift. It truly is an unselfish gift.
Yeah, and and going beyond that, my sisters even, in a way, they get benefited that, their brother, the only brother they have, might be, we're not in control of what goes on in our life, but it gives them the feeling that we can keep moving forward. And so that is kind of where we were. And finally, I was hanging up the phone one day with my coordinator, and she said, "Cliff, you don't ever know where these people come from. You might have had this person in a camp or something." So then I'm thinking, okay, what's that mean? Okay, because I ran
Kind of a little
40-some camps in my life, and then plus the shooting clinics, 90 or 100. But anyway, that's kind of where it started, and then the process of revealing came the next.
Did you reveal it, or did somebody else reveal it?
No, I did. My intention was never to stay anonymous. And I had to let my family know first. So, it was a series of conversations of, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And, once I made all those notifications, and mind you, my family's wonderful. They're used to me kind of doing maybe not mainstream things. I was a flight nurse for 10 years. I was a travel nurse and I traveled all around. I lived in Hawaii. So I've done some kind of some extreme things in my life. So this is kind of on par for my personality here. So my family was not surprised, and they're like, yes, this absolutely fits who you are as a person, and we fully support you. So then it's, gosh, how do I tell Cliff it's me? I don't know what to say. Do I call him? Do I email him? Do I show up at one of his basketball games and be like, hey, it's me? I did. I snuck into the gym to watch him coach.
Do you have a sign?
Yeah.
I'm your donor.
I still didn't know.
So what game did you start? What game did you sneak into then?
I snuck into the sectional game.
Okay.
I did it. Grant and I, Frankton. We were sitting up high, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is who I remember." Him down on the sidelines with his intensity, and just I loved it. It just brought back all sorts of good memories. But ultimately, I ended up writing an email, and the subject line was, "Hi, Coach." Because what do you say? Like,
it is.
Well, and the thing
I
is,
hadn't thought of it.
True.
It is awkward.
But I'm sure for Cliff, you're used to, seeing them at the game, that's not unusual for you, because having covered him, so many of his former players and former assistant coaches show up to Tipton games and and they just don't, and they stay to talk to him afterwards. They show up in support of him, which is in itself tells more than anything about the person you are, Cliff, that those people years later still show up to support you, and how that shows the impact you've had on their lives.
Well, it's why this has happened, is because of who he is and his relationship building, and the people who respect and admire him so much, that he has given so much back to every single community he's lived in, that these people continue to show up in his lives.
Yeah, I always thought a lot of times people would ask me if I was speaking at a clinic, what's most important, your offense, your defense, or the rebounding game? and I would say the relationship part. Because I felt like, when you coach, you have to be honest, and you have to have difficult conversations sometime. But if the players know that you truly care about them, and when you have your parent meeting, you explain that, there's difficult times because some people are only concerned about, did we win and did my son play? But there's, as much as there's talked about that, not everybody's like that. There's so many good people and so many good parents and so many good players, and especially players that you build that relationship with so they understand this isn't anything personal. This is maybe where we have to do. And I know there's been times where I said, we're going to change roles here. I'm going to be the player and you're going to be the coach. And we're going to suggest, we're going to go through this. And sometimes that was helpful to the player because it's hard for them, But one of the greatest ever situations was at DeKalb High School with Nate Tapman, who was a senior on the very first team, a junior on the very first team I had. And when he became a senior, Luke Recker, Mr. Basketball, was a freshman. And believe it or not, Luke didn't start the first 6 games. But on that 6th game, I knew the 7th game Luke was going to have to start. It was time. And so I brought Nate into the office and I sat down and I said, Nate, I'm here to talk to you today. And he goes, Coach, you don't have to go any further. He said, Luke's better than me. And I know the way you like to press. You can bring me off the bench for some energy. And I thought, this is the greatest individual meeting I've ever had. And Nate took care of it, okay? And so over the years, I think when you're straight ahead, honest, caring, sometimes there's things that come back, but you're always trying to pay forward. And this is a story that is unbelievable. I remember Kira. I remember her in camp. I never would have thought one time about a transplant. You just don't think about these things. You don't know you're going to maybe be ill. And so I am so thankful. But she and Grant did watch the sectional, and then it came time. I was leaving Nolan Swan's Anderson college game in the playoffs, and it happened to be on a night I could see it, and we were off in the sectional at that point. And so I called it was a Friday night actually, so it was, I guess, somewhere in there, maybe just before the sectional, but so it was a Friday night, and I had to go back to Tipton from where I scouted because that's where my machine's set up. And that was the way this year was, last year and a half was, I basically was in Tipton Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday I'd go home just for a little while and then drive back at night because it was 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. And so it wasn't worth carrying the machine around all the time. I did a few times, holidays, things like that, but I didn't want to have a machine break or something like that. So, but anyway, Julie said, I have an email, and I know the donor. And she said, would you like to know? And I'm driving down this country road out of Anderson, heading back up toward Tipton. And, what I remember, there was a few times in my basketball career where I had to play the second game of a day, where you won the first game and then you're going to play again. And I remember sometimes how my body felt just different because you were tired, okay? And you felt different nerve endings. And as I was driving, all these nerve endings that I felt in the second game of a day, or the emotion of there really is a kidney, because you always believe it can happen, but it does feel different times when you're by yourself that it could be make-believe. And I said, Julie, I can't have you tell me right now because, and I start kind of shaking right now because I just said, I just need to get back to the apartment and Tipton, and I'll call you. And so then I called her and I said, I just would like to wait till I come home tomorrow morning. So I definitely started my dialysis really early that night.
So you were anxious to get home.
Yeah, I was ready to roll at 4 or 5 o'clock. Okay. So, and Julie knew I would, but so we got there, and she had the email, and she said, "Do you want to see it?" I said, "Just lay it on the coffee table." So I was on one side, she was on the other, and the email was right between us, and we just talked. I said, this is something it was emotional. I'm an older guy, but at the moment that your life has a possibility to change, and that all the things that you were questioning, could you keep doing this? Could you keep going? Could you go places? Could you function? All of that was going through me. And of course, who was the person? And finally, Julie said, because, you think when maybe a camp person, I'm thinking about all the different people that I've been involved with, but at that moment I wasn't thinking about the girls' basketball camp I had run. But she said, "I think you'll feel better when you see the signature and where this person works from." And so first I read the email. I wanted to stay disciplined enough to read what the message was.
You don't want to get to the end, right?
Yeah, and it's so touching. I think I may use it for a letter of recommendation for something. But then I read, and immediately I knew the name, and I had to think a little bit about how long it had been. Again, I wasn't watching her at her job. She had been watching me at my job. And so immediately I grabbed every yearbook I had, and I called Megan, and Megan had all the yearbooks out in Georgia that she had. And Matt said, "Oh, Dad, yeah, Kira, absolutely." He's, because he had gone with a girl in her class at that time, and they'd been over to the house. And Matt was just so touched. And so then it was real, and now we were going to take the next step about how we were going to meet and go forward.
Did Julie say, I would imagine when she opened up that email and she started to read it, I can only imagine how emotional she got reading it. And the relief, just for her, because I am sure that your family wanted to be strong for you when you were going through this and didn't really want you to see their worry or their concern that you might not find a kidney in time. So her relief had to be just tremendous too.
Oh, I think so. And I think the difference in her and Kira, they really understand what's going on here. I always tell people, what Kira's done in her life, being a travel nurse and being on a helicopter, bringing people to save their lives, to working in the NICU. She has seen it all. My daughter worked in the NICU before she got into research and teaching. Matt is a doctor at Emory in Georgia, and Julie was a surgical nurse for 30 years, and I was a phys ed major and a social studies teacher. So what did I know? All I knew, though, because of how I always have viewed life, there's an opportunity for a chance. And so when people tell me, "Cliff, you had to be so brave to do this," it was different. It was different when they wheeled me into the surgical room and I saw people standing over, the doctor says, "Well, there's where the kidney is." And I'm thinking, it just came out of Kira, and there's somebody guarding it, But I go back to what Kira has done, because as you put it on the other end, I'm not sure, and that's what I told her today. She held my hand, my wife's hand. I feel so guilty because I don't want to feel guilty. I feel so rewarded too, but the way I feel guilty is I only thought about it when I went to the driver's license branch. And I never was signed up as a kidney donor. And to think someone is.
Do that, everybody.
I have got donor. I've done it. In fact, because we were talking about family, and I remember when I told my mom and my sisters, because if something happens to you and your license isn't, maybe mangled or torn up, I said, look, I want you to know I want to be a donor. I have signed donor. And my mom goes, and I said, I want to be a donor. If I have any organs that are able to be a donor, I want to donate, whether it's to save somebody's life or eyesight or whatever. I said, I want to donate. I want to be a donor.
Speaking of which, you specifically donated to Cliff, but people don't have to specifically donate to anybody, right?
I had a classmate, I think we're in our 30s, and she developed leukemia, and her family had encouraged everybody. Our class sent out things, and you wouldn't believe the line for people to be bone marrow, but to go to donate blood and to sign up to be bone marrow donors. And I remember the bone marrow people calling me, said, hey, we got this that you said you were ready. And I said, yeah. And they said, if you're not a match, are you willing to donate to anybody if a name comes up? And I said, yes. I said, some of it would be logistics and finances, because if it would be somebody far away, I might not be able to afford to go do it. But I said, yes. I said, I just didn't do this for my classmate. I would love to be able to help her, but there's a need. And so, yes.
Yeah, there's absolutely a need, for bone marrow transplant, which actually I did at the beginning of my career. So transplant has been in my blood. And so, you can, whether it's donating blood, donating your bone marrow, donating a kidney, these are acts of altruism that you can do to save someone else's life. And as, human beings that are sitting around the table, what is more the purpose of life than to be able to take care of each other? At the end of the day, nobody's going to care about my title, what car I'm driving. That doesn't mean anything to me other than my greatest achievements in life is being a mom, and now, being a living kidney donor and affecting someone else's life in the way that I have. And that to me is the true meaning and purpose in life.
So you guys now sit down, you met before your surgeries, right?
We did.
Yeah.
We had lunch.
Yeah, we had lunch and we ordered the same thing that day as well.
I know.
You guys are just so compatible.
We are compatible in our food choices and in our blood type.
Probably a little bit of tissue too, right? Because you have to match up tissue-wise too.
Yes. Yeah. There's a couple levels. You have to be the correct blood type for each other, and then the tissue typing just to make sure what is the probability of rejecting because of antibodies and such. And so,
If somebody wants to do more, what would be the first step that you would recommend?
There's two ways to becoming an organ donor. One is through the registry, through BNV or Donate Life Indiana, of saying yes to when I die, I want to become an organ donor. Then there's also living donation, which can be done through the National Kidney Registry, and going to their website and finding out more of how to become a living donor. But I do want to mention it starts with someone saying yes. It starts with someone signing up to be an organ donor, and just to kind of talk through some of the myths that I hear in my profession. Well, if I have that heart on my license, if something happens to me, they're not going to save me. That is completely inaccurate. But you would think that people like that is a real fear of people going into the hospital thinking that they won't save you and just take your organs.
Well, that's terrible, because the only way they're not going to save you is if you have a DNR.
So one, as a medical professional who has worked in EMS and emergency rooms on a helicopter, not once did I ever pay attention to someone's donor status. My as a healthcare professional, our first priority is, what do I have to do to save your life?
That's the only priority at first.
The only priority is, how can I save your life? And here's the thing. To become an organ donor, someone has to actually save your life. Like, they have to do all the things to save your life for you to become an organ donor, because we can't actually recover organs for transplantation without life support. So you have to be stable in the hospital. Yes. And then that's when, unfortunately, if you become brain dead through a traumatic head injury, or your family makes a withdrawal decision saying this isn't the quality of life my loved one would want, and they move into end of life decision-making, comfort care, and then we can proceed. But just because someone chooses not to register in the state of Indiana, that doesn't mean they are not supportive of donation. It means that they're leaving the decision up to their family. So if anybody gets anything out of this podcast, is really talk about what your wishes are at your end of life, because your family is left trying to make these decisions for you. And I love what you said. Whatever happens, I want to be an organ donor, and I want you to know that to your mom, to your family, is because people don't know what your wishes are, just as much as do you want to be cremated or buried or whatever. But a lot of it is, if I had the opportunity to become an organ donor, this is what I want, or not. I mean, it's a very personal decision. Obviously, I advocate for people becoming an organ donor, because what are you going to do with your organs afterwards? If you have the ability to save someone's life, my thinking is, why wouldn't you? There's lots of, we can get into all the religious and all that reasons why someone may not want to donate, and that is perfectly fine and respected, but you just have to let people know what your wishes are. So yes, in the state of Indiana, you can make that decision for yourself, which is, at the time of my death, if I'm eligible, I want to become an organ donor, or if I choose not to, that means I'm leaving the decision up to my family. That does not mean it's a no. It just means I'm allowing my family to make that decision.
Coach, I bet you look at life a little differently now, and tell us what it's been like since.
Well, I've always enjoyed life, and there's been some challenges, and I've always thought you have to focus on what needs to be done now. And but I do look at life differently, and I knew deep down when Kira and I met again that life would be different. And when I met our doctor that did the surgeries for both of us in the same day, we arrived on our game day at 5:30 in the morning, and I came out of the surgery at 10 after 7 at night. So it was a long day. But when I met him, as he came in, Kira was done, and he told me good things. And of course, that's a relief. And Grant came by and told us he had been down to find out. But Dr. Goneem said, we're going to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes. And I've always lived by that coaching. We're going to do this until we get it right. And that gave me a tremendous amount of confidence in what he said. And then when we were actually in the surgical room, which was amazing how big it was and how many people were in there, lots of people, all masked, all capped and gowned. And he said, you have any last words you'd like to say? And I said, let's win. And then all I know, that was it. And I didn't wake up until probably 10 after 9 that night. But I just would like to say that you do look at life differently, but you still had a lot of this. Kira looks at it differently now too, but she was already looking at life in a different way than many people do. And I think to be able to stay in teaching and coaching as many years as I did, I had to look at things differently and understand there's some bumps, there's some adversity, but you keep going. And then to have this happen, you know, it's like you realize I have another opportunity here. My life could have been shortened, you know, much sooner. And so what am I going to do with that? So even more laser focused than ever. And some things are starting to come together now as I process, because the most important thing was, number one, get well, but number two was to begin to tell our message.
Tell us, part of that getting well, I mean, how long was it from you post-surgery? And I mean, do you still have limitations 14 weeks out?
Not really, but I do need to watch lifting some heavy things. You know, if it hurts, I stop. But when you start out, you know, there are a few things you've got to pay attention to. But the biggest thing is you've really got to take your medications, okay? You can't miss. You have to prepare that. You have to sit and think about it and make sure. And I made sure that Julie watched me do my medications. I'd always done all of those during dialysis. I had to relearn the whole process of medications, because what you do on dialysis is totally different than what you do after transplant. But that's okay, because there's 3 medicines I'll take the rest of my life that are anti-rejection medicines so that my kidney can be healthy. So that's something that you do. But there's a lot of rest involved, but there's a lot of getting up and making yourself move. And so the first day after, there's a few days where I took it real easy. I could walk down the road 3 houses, and I could walk back 3 houses. So that was 6. The next day, I walked to the 4th house, 8. Next day, 10. And eventually, I got up to 70, and I thought, okay, that's enough. I'm going, because I was losing track at that. Is that 24 or 26? Okay. And so then I got into 30-minute walks every day. And I've continued, I haven't moved beyond that, other than I really pick up my pace now, because I don't want to stop. I want to keep
stronger
going.
is the goal.
Yeah. And then I noticed how weak I had been, even through dialysis. My upper body strength, you know, standing at the counter in the kitchen and maybe trying to fix a sandwich. My shoulders would get exhausted, or if I had to lift something from the cabinet. But all I did every day was I started each morning with what I called a gratitude and celebration walk, which that was after I finally got through so many houses. So it'd only be like 8 to 10 minutes. I'd walk outside in the dark, walk back, and all I would think about is what had happened to me and what Kira had done, and how thankful that I had this opportunity to be walking in the dark right now and listening to the birds chirp. I love that. You know, it was meaningful to me. And then I would go on with my exercise later in the day. But I had to, gratitude is beyond belief. And, you know, I don't know how much longer we're going to go here. So I've got a statement here that I'll go ahead and make now. For anyone that is listening, I trust, I hope that they can believe this can happen. And I know that sometimes it can be discouraging, look how fortunate I was. There's only 7,000 living donors a year in the United States of America, and I was one of them. But I still advocated, and I was advocating at different places I had been. There was other websites that coaches had that had sent some things out, and people were looking at the website, and I encourage them to tell the story because it's easy to turn inward. And the only reason I turned a little bit inward at Tipton was I was also working with 15, 16, and 17-year-old young people, and I didn't want them focused on that. So I had that part of the story, but then I had to do this other part to allow some adult young men that I've coached know. And you have anybody you can talk to and be your advocate. And I struggled for a while, what will I say? And eventually I just said, what would I say? I would just say, I'm not here to ask you for your kidney, but I am here to ask you to tell my story. So people, even when they're discouraged, I hope that they can hear, from this podcast, that they'll make a renewed effort, a few minutes every day, to try to be their advocate for themselves and to believe there's somebody out there. Because, our world right now, there's lots of things that affect a lot of people. There's lots of media that can put people in very bad feelings and situations. But what I see is mankind has a lot of goodness. What Kira has done is beyond belief. But when you think about what you've done for our Tipton community, you've had to fight to keep some type of newspaper because they was going to drop. But you found a way. It may not be the way you want, but it's the way you've done it. You've added podcasts to things so that you can stay in what you both love. You both love it. You're finding your way. And that's why we can't ever forget, people will hear the message at some point, and it only still takes one. And that's why I hope people will continue to believe no matter what and share their story.
And it really is a blessing to him, of course, but it's a blessing to you as well, to be able to give life. And tell us about your recovery and what your life's been like since.
Oh gosh, it's hard to kind of process. I've always said it's hard to process like the impact that you just did and this decision and what this means. But ultimately, you guys have listened to Cliff talk, and he's just one of the most kind, genuine human beings you'll ever meet. And of course, you want to do something to help him out. And that's absolutely, I feel he has added so much joy and to my life. Like I said, like I gained a family. I gave up a kidney and gained an entire family. They have embraced me. They have invited me into their lives. And Cliff and I talk almost every day just to check in. I am so fulfilled by this experience in ways that you just can't even fathom. You don't think about it. I didn't do this to get anything in return, but what I gained was so much more than I could have ever thought about. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our journey. My recovery has been near probably textbook. I had no complications. I was off work only for 3 weeks. I could have taken 6, but I like to say I fly a desk now, and so there's not much heavy lifting that I have to do. My son likes to say all I do is use my mouth and mouse. So so thank you for that, to reduce me to that. But no, I was able to go back to work. I went back remotely on the 4th week after surgery. I felt great. I literally don't feel any different from having 2 kidneys down to 1. My energy levels are the same. I feel good. I had major abdominal surgery. Like, that's not to be glossed over. So there were, probably the first week post surgery, are you just kind of sore and moving slowly? Absolutely. It was such a small amount of time to be kind of laid up in the grand spectrum of the year of your life to do something incredible. And so I had a smooth recovery. I'm back to doing everything that I'm golfing. I'm, playing, I'm beating all of the 10-year-olds in the neighborhood in basketball, including my son. That is important for me to maintain that status. And so I will let them know that I beat you as a 43-year-old who only has one kidney now. I am still schooling you. I know I will stop playing them when I think that is in jeopardy. So,
With your question, during dialysis, I did carry a special card in my wallet of information, how they could get a hold of certain people and so on, and what was pertinent to my health at the time. But with transplant, we are becoming more healthy as we go, and Kira is amazing, and I've moved a long way down the road in 14 weeks. And what I would say to people, obviously, if you have your body opened up, robotic surgery done, there's going to be some slow times starting, but it's no different than anything else. And believe it or not, they have the process for anyone who's thinking about hoping to be a recipient. The most I've ever taken is Tylenol.
yeah.
And the same for her.
Same for me. I just took Tylenol after surgery, which is incredible. I mean, they just did such a great job with pain management, and
So knees and backs took a lot more.
yeah.
But
My ACL was a lot worse than my kidney donation. So
yeah, and
honestly.
it's amazing how it works, and the incision, what the size is, and it's just incredible what these people do. And again, speaking to that, it's incredible what Kira's passion is for what she does for her living, okay? And the message that she sends, people at her workplace don't have to be a kidney donor, okay? But to be able to be a kidney donor, and we're going to be speaking to her group in late July here, and they're going to see us up front together. We're really the two people that are involved here. She is the donor and me as the recipient. And it can become overwhelming. There are nights sometimes where it's quiet in my house, and I will pull up. We've done some, different things that we've done, videos and so on. And the one I always pull up is the very first one by the Indiana Donor Network, because that's where it was in front of the surgery, and it was the day of the surgery and after. And, on April 1st, we were 1 week away from the surgery. We both were doing our pregame check, if you will, okay? Because they have to make sure you're still good a week before, and we passed with flying colors. And I got to meet her mom, and the first thing she says, "I'm so thankful Kira is doing this. I'm so proud." Now think about that. And so, I'm so proud it's you that she's doing this for. And then when I told my son, he said, "Oh yeah," she said, "she was such a nice person when I met her," and Kira's mother. And I just encourage people to go the distance, never give in, and keep living. Don't stop, even though it's difficult. Just allow yourself more time and be fair to yourself, and keep going, because if you keep going, you're going to keep talking to more people, And when you talk to more people, the story will get shared that much more. So from my side of this, I really appreciate both of you doing this for us today at Cafe Patachou, and it's really great to see both of you.
Any final information that you want to make sure that people understand?
There are over 100,000 people on the wait list today in the United States that waiting on a life-saving organ transplant. There are 1,400 people here in the state of Indiana who are waiting on a life-saving organ transplant. 90% of people on the wait list are waiting for a kidney. A kidney is the easiest thing to donate. And so we can affect so many people's lives by saying yes to donation, whether that be at the B&V or through living kidney donation. And I would encourage people to do their research, understand what it is, and say yes. And if anybody wants to reach out, I'm happy to always have a conversation about donation and transplantation. Obviously, we can talk a long time about it, but I am always willing to have that conversation.
One quick question, because it just popped into my mind: are there any age requirements? I mean, can you become too old to donate?
We actually just transplanted a 95-year-old person, their liver, at their end of their life. So no, there are no age limits. There are certain things that we look at, but we do that every single day to make sure it's the best possible organ for the recipient. But don't rule yourself out.
Coach, Kira, Michelle, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Yes, thank you so much. And we'll at some point we'll find out a place that you can get in touch with Cliff and even Kira if you would like for them to come and speak to a group that you have. And let me tell you, they're wonderful through this podcast. I hope you guys listen. I know it's a long one, but this message is it's an important one. And it's a very important story. Cliff, thank you for allowing me to, when you announced your resignation, to kind of tell your story. I'll tell you, it's the most interactive. It's on my Twitter feed. It's the highest post interaction. I had over 20,000 people check out that post. So,
well, and thank you for covering the Tipton Blue Devils as you did for 6 years that I was there. And thanks to all the Tipton people. It was a wonderful place to coach, and it will always reside within my heart as one of the most best places I've ever been.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as Michelle and I enjoyed doing it. Thank you so much to Coach Hawkins and especially to Kira for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report and for the celebration of life that they allowed us to be a part of. And thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast with your friends and family. And please go like, subscribe, and follow us at SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or YouTube. That would be very helpful to us, and we would really appreciate it. The Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.